Hi viewers, in this video we will dive into the movie Rampage. We will discuss the movie story, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and characters. Additionally, we will cover the movie prediction details and box office performance. Finally, we will provide our reviews and personal reactions. Let's begin with the movie story. In 1993, a new piece of technology called CRISPR was developed and then quickly used to develop dangerous experiments. In the present day, aboard a space station, a lab rat has been mutated with CRISPR and has wiped out the entire crew. Dr. Carrie Atkin is the sole survivor and she is contracting the head at Energene, the one who developed the CRISPR mutagen to help her return. Energene CEO Claire Whedon ordered Carrie to bring back the mutagen samples or to not return at all. Carrie goes back for the samples and the rat monster chases her. She makes it to the escape pod and it releases as the station blows up and the raid's still inside. But the damage to the pod causes it to break open, depolarize, and explode, killing Carrie. The samples themselves fly away across the country. Set an animal sanitary in San Diego, primatologist David Okoye, played by Dwayne Johnson, leads co-worker Nelson, Connor, and Amy to an ape enclosure. They observe an ape named Pavo who attempts to find a female ape to meet with, but Davis splits them up. Pavo is upset until Davis talks him down gently. Just then, an albino gorilla named George comes running in, which leads to Connor freaking out and upsetting Pavo, who turns after Connor until George knocks him over. George threatens Pavo until David talks to him as well. George turns out to be playful and David considers him his best friend. After work, Amy tries to invite Davis out for drinks, but he kindly turns her down. Nelson then approaches him and asks why he is closer to animal than he is with people. David says the animal is just get him. That night, the mutagen samples start to land. One lands in George's enclosure, another in the forest near a pack of wolves, and the last one in a river in Florida. A lone wolf is sprayed with the gas while a crocodile eats the whole samples and George gets sprayed with it as well. David is called in the next morning to check on George. Nelson tells him George is in the grizzly bear enclosure. They find a dead bear in there and George hiding in fear. He has a scratch mark on his chest and indicates to David that the bear attacked him first. George steps out and has now grown up to 9 feet tall. News reports of the mutagen hitting the country as hit. Kate Caldwell sees the news on TV, as does Claire Wyden, and her brother Brett is freaking out but the amount of money they are losing. While Claire is satisfied that the mutagen for her project Rampage experiment is successful. In order to handle what might happen next, Claire suggests they hire a private military group to fix things. Kate goes to the animal sanctuary to try and talk to Davis about what has happened, as she claimed to work for Energene and is responsible for developing the mutagen so she may be able to stop George from growing. When they try to go and find George, he is caged up until he starts to grow more aggressive. He eventually breaks free from the cage and runs loose on the sanctuary, terrifying all the guests. Davis runs after him just as the cops arrives. They aim their guns at George until Davis manages to talk George down. Things get worse as a chopper flies overhead and starts hitting George with tranquilizer darts until he passes out. In Wyoming, the military group led by Bork heads into the forest to recover the mutagen sample. Bork contacts the Videns and informs them that the container is empty. As the team moves deeper into the forest, they discover dead wolves sprawled out across the ground, as well as a massive paw print in the ground. They are then found and attacked by the mutated wolf nicknamed Ralph as he runs through the forest. The team shoots at him, but their efforts are futile as Ralph picks them off one by one until only Berks remains. He calls to the chopper to shoot at Ralph, but the wolf leaps out of the trees and racks the chopper, causing it to crash down into the lake. Bark is then concerned by Ralph and he attempts to take one last stand, but Ralph devours him. A government agent named Harvey Russell arrives at a cemetery to bring George onto a plane to keep him contained from the public. Davis and Kate are taken in for questioning as well. Davis argues that having George on the plane is suicide, but Russell thinks they have everything under control. In the air, Russell reveals, after looking through Davis and Kate's record, that Kate had been fired from Energene after attempting to steal research from the lab, for which she served 13 months in prison. This leads Davis to realize she was lying and that she cannot fix George. After learning of the wolf incident, Claire activates a radio frequency that calls to the mutated animals. Ralph and the crocodile known as Lizzie make their way to Chicago, where Energene is located. George, despite being kept sedated, manages to hear the frequency as well and he starts to wake up. He goes into full rage mode and breaks the sage down. He attacks the agent as Davis tries to keep himself and Kate safe. George almost kills Russell until Davis intervenes and George merely knocks Russell out. The plane's turbine blows out and it starts head down. Davis straps parachutes onto himself, Kate and Russell and they eject themselves from the plane as it crashes to the ground. The three land and see the George survived the crash and is making his way to the city. The crash and the George is making his way to the city. Davis makes it clear that he does not trust Kate after what he is learned about her. She explained that while she was working for Energene, her brother was stricken with cancer and she hoped that CRISPR might cure him until he learned that Claire had been using CRISPR to develop dangerous weapons. Kate tried to make off with it but was caught and locked up. Davis then tells her how he found George. Poachers got his mother and a scared woman George was hiding under the poacher's truck. Davis and his team recovered him and killed the poachers as they had first shot at them. Russell awakens and is thankful to Davis for saving his life, so he decides to help him and Kate. Davis, Kate, and Russell meet with a military team that is keeping surveillance on George and Delph as they head into Chicago. They realize the animals are being called into the city and that they must find a way to contain them. Russell helps Davis and Kate steal a chopper and make their way into the city. George, Ralph, and Lizzie arrive in the city, leading to all-out rampage. Davis and Kate arrive at the monster starts tearing the city apart, knowing there's no way they'll be able to stop them on their own. They head to Energene to find the antidote that can stop them. Davis lands the chopper and they run into the building amidst the chaos. They find the lab with the antidote but the villain find them first and Brett holds them at gunpoint. Claire tells the two that the antidote will not make the animals return to normal but it will only remove their heightened aggression. Takes the gun and shoots Davis in the abdomen before taking Kate with her. The Videns attempt to board their own chopper and make off with their materials and Kate. but the monster starts making their way up the tower. George makes it to stop and smash the chopper, leading Brett to run away. Davis appears after surviving the gunshot and he saves Kate, but Claire is forcing them to help her. Instead, Davis distracts George long enough for Kate to take a vial of the antidote that she recovered and place it in Claire's bag. Kate punches Claire and shoves her into George's path so that he grabs Claire and eats her, along with the antidote. Meanwhile, Brad is almost out the door when he comes across Russell, who somehow who somehow made it quickly into the city. He ordered Brad to hand over the laptop containing his research so that he can do free. Brad happily obliges and runs out the door only to get massively slapped by a piece of falling debris. Davis and Kate wait for the antidote to take effect as George continues to destroy while Delp and Lacey make it to stop as well. Davis and Kate board the Wyden's chopper so that they can get enough air to avoid any serious damage. The monsters all cause the tower to collapse and go crashing down. Davis and Cave survives and George emerges from the trouble, now back to his old self. However, Ralph and Lizzie are still rampaging. So Davis and George decide it's time to put an end to this. It also turned out that the military is trying to launch an airstrike to take out the monsters. So Kate and Russell is trying to call it off. George battles Ralph and Lizzie. He tosses Ralph around, but the wolf can fly and shoot quills, while Lizzie is the biggest of them all and is high indestructible. Davis tricks Ralph into gliding toward him, only for Davis to move and let Ralph fly into Lizzie's path. The croc grabs Ralph by the throat and bites his head off, swallowing it. George attempts to pound Lizzie, but she is too strong and she tosses George against a pole that impales him. Davis throws a garnet belt at Lizzie's neck and also tries using the chopper's artillery to take her down, but it is barely scratched her. Lizzie goes after Davis and nearly eats him until George leaps into the air with the pole, and he rams it into Lizzie's eye and runs it through her head, finally killing her. After seeing everything that happened, the military colonel calls off the strike. George appears weakened from his wound and apparently dies, only to reveal he was just missing with Davis. The hero starts to leave the city as they wonder where George's new home will be. Dwayne Johnson finally gets a star to match his size, if not charisma, in the sometimes glossarily ludicrous Rampage, a movie based on a hit arcade game that was literally just larger than life monsters bashing built in. If you are thinking, wow, that seems like a filmy premise from which to adapt a feature film, you are not entirely wrong. Directed by San Andres Helmer Brad Peyton, this CGI blockbuster is often a definite stupid movie, most comfortable with what it's trying to accomplish. When giant monsters are destroying half of downtown Chicago or leaping on moving helicopters, it's the narrative issue in between that allows the movie magic to falter every now and then. However, when Jensen is doing that movie action star thing he does so well, and giants animal are going enormous mano, there's undoubtedly goofy fun to be had. You just have to be patient during the downtime. Rampage opened by establishing its ridiculous tone early. A scientist on a space station is struggling to save some genetically engineered samples from, well, a mutated super rat. The station is on fire and everyone else appears dead, but she is ordered to save the science. Yes, Rampage opened with a super space rat abroad on a on-fire spaceship hurtling to Earth. It's continually a torn shatter. The samples plummet to Earth and land in three locations. One happened to hit ground in a San Diego wildlife sanctuary managed by Davis Okoye. Davis' favorite beast is a giant albino gorilla named George, and the clever animal happens upon one of the genetic samples. Before you know it, George is growing at a never before seen rate, accompanied by increased aggression and unstable hunger. He kills a bear, escapes, and well, lots of things go boom. That's why you come to a movie like Rampage to see and hear things go boom. A critical caveat seems appropriate here. I dig giant monster movies. I still away at the 1933 King Kong, a movie that I consider among the most important ever made. I even dug Peter Jackson's 2005 remake as well as a recent iteration of The King of the Monsters both in Gareth Edwards' 2014 American version and Hideaki Anno and Shinji 2016 Japanese version. There's something about the spectacle of movies like King Kong and Godzilla that's singularly cinematic. It's not something that other forms like theater, TV, or function can do in quite the same way. And this appreciation for big creators slamming into building with my belief that Dan Jensen is one of the few groundworking actors we can legitimately call a movie star, and Rampage should be a slam dunk. I even played the arcade game. So why isn't it a slam dunk? Sure, there are times when Rampage gives viewers exactly what they are hoping for when they open their wallets and wiped out their movie pass. No one can really accuse this movie for not delivering on what was in the trailer, although one could argue the whole movie is in those trailer. So why is not it the King Kong meets the Rock? It could have been. First, the film seriously muddled its Vigo attempts at emotional undercurrents. Davis mentioned early on that he likes the company of animal more than people, but to say he has no actual character would be an understatement. George is actually more developed. And Naomi Harris' eventual sidekick Kate has an emotional backstory that designed to make her more accessible but really just falls flat. A scene between the two when they share their past, including when Davis found George and saved him from poachers, it embarrassingly mishandled. But nothing thinks the film more than Jake Lacy and Malin Arkiman's villain, the nefarious siblings who run the evil company, doing evil sense things and making evil big animals and more evil stuff. They sometimes sound like they were written as over the top caricature. Lassie Britt actually says there's a reason we were doing these experiments in space, but the character performances are so bland that the movie shakes every time they show up. More fun are Joe Manganiello, Soldiers of Fortune, and Geoffrey Dean Morgan's OGA, other government agency officer. Morgan delivers every line with a cocked neck and southern side eye that hints he knows how goofy this whole thing truly is, or at least should be. Morgan's having fun for sure, and Jason is charismatic, but Patton too often struggle to convey that big monster movie sense of excitement cinematically. Even when Rampage gets to the firework, it feels like it's too often going through the motions. There are just enough big beats, a giant Wolf leaping at a mid-air helicopter, George using tags like toys on Michigan Avenue, all the animals climbing the will always be known as to me. CS Tower to keep fans engaged, but monster movies should be more than just keep you engaged. They should wow. They should fascinate. They should strike the imagination in such a way that they allow things like cheesy dialogue and thin characters to not only be critically dismissible but downright preferable. Rampage never quite gets to the point where you can consistently ignore the things it does wrong, and that can be deadly for a movie about animal the size of apartment building. It's a tunnel balance that Rampage only sometimes it may be they will perfect it in time of Dig Dog. Rampage Movie Review. Dan Johnson tackled giant animal run amok. Here's Phil to remind you that while most guys of 45 had punch buckles on their tummy that balloon outwards as they bent forward, Dan Johnson gets two or three on the back of his big shaven head when he looks up. The nap of the man mountains neck nipple with mini spare tires, and he is doing a lot of gym build rubbernecking as the glamorous creatures crashing around overhead in his enjoyable preposterous summer auctioneer. Based on the 80s video game of the same name, it's directed by Brad Payton, who is also in charge of San Andreas. Dan's last movie featuring a lot of helicopters. Dance feels awe, fear, anger, and a certain type of embroiled kinship with these mega animals. He sort of feels their pain as the uber beast roar, rear up on their hind legs, and do extensive CGI render damage in urban environments. Their hairy bills bristling with the footlight tranquilizer darts that uncaring military personnel have blasted into them. This is the story of one big and big-hearted guy and his paganate bro, Epimens with George, the sweet-neutered albino gorilla who is accidentally administers an illegal genetic suppressor drug and starts growing and growing like a sinister mix of Alien and Ilsa from Born Free. Johnson plays Davis Okoye, whose casually confident muscularity is as impressive as his synthetic expertise in the field of primatology at the San Diego Nature Reserves. Having once been a Special Forces humber tackling poachers, Davis has chosen to retain as a zoo guy, albeit one built like a brick convenience. It is here that he teaches young postcards, including hot younger women whose interest in him gets politely dropped in the service of underlining his heterosexual family movie landing bail credential. But up in space, a creepy corporation is developing a genetic editing program that will mess with the proportions and energy levels of otherwise innocuous domestic animals. Why, oh why, do these experiments need to be in space? Something to do with zero atmosphere or zero gravity, or in it just so we can see a gigantic rat crashing around in spaceship. Either way, these developable procedures come to grief and canister bristling with growth hormones explode meteorically out of the craft, falling through the atmosphere and down into the San Diego reserves, where their insidious little macroparticles make their way into the nostrils of George, the lovable gorilla with whom only the day before Davis was exchanging high-spirited sign language banter. Soon George is growing out of control, and so are a few other animals, including a wolf and something that looks like a crocodile crossed with a watchdog. The only person who can talk to George and maybe even get the assistance in tackling the whole big animal chaos issue is Davis. In the traditional creature feature manner, he gets assistance from a bona fide scientist who was once employed by the same creepy corporation running the experiments until he realized how irresponsible they were. This is Dr. Cat Caldwell, played by Naomie Harris. The pair of them are also given growing help from a government agent named Russell, played by Geoffrey Dean Morgan, a good old Texan boy who's permitted a barrel-handled revolver in an open-carry hustler attached to his belt. When science hits the bed, says Russell brusquely, I am the guy they call to change the sheets. Charming as for the evil corporation, this appears to be run by just two people who may be married or may be creepy scabbling siblings, played by Malin Ackerman and Jake Lacy, although they could as played by Amy Poehler and Will Arnett, recreating their performances from Blades of Glory. It is entertainingly over the top, although perhaps the CGI work is not quite out of the top driver. Maybe if quite so much of the budget had not been splattered on that race in space scene at the beginning. The crashing helicopter work could have been fine-tuned. As for Rampage 2, surely one of the army of screenwriters trying to wonder out loud what would happen if Dwayne Johnson himself accidentally inhaled the surprise drug. It doesn't bear thinking about. Rampage is the only mutant alligator movie with the guts to recreate 9/11. I had no idea that Rampage was based on a video game until somewhere around the point where a giant flying wolf eats Joe Manganiello. An arcade cabinet makes an extremely conspicuous cameo in the background of the villain's penthouse lair. I have since learned that Rampage, a King Kong knockoff starring a trio of city-smashing mutant animals, was an arcade staple in the mid-80s and more importantly, one of the many properties acquired by Warner Bros. When they brought Midway Games in 2009, nearly 10 years later, the first fruit of that iconic deal has arrived on our screens. Staring the rock, it's trashed, but it's trashed with context. If you ignore its equation, pedigree, Rampage directed by San Andreas Mysterio Brad Patton feels like something that accidentally got sent down the wrong tube to a slightly too fancy casting directors. Megalo, Naomi Harris, and Melon Ackerman are all here beefingly and are granted with wide release. Despite its insister name checking off CRISPR, Jan editing to root the flying wolf in cinematic reality, I guess this is in fact way more sci-fi than sci-fi one short shots of a Shikrando. There's a giant alligator thaw, it's aggressively dumb, and I had feel safe in the assumption that everyone was in on the joke if it were not for the absence of any good ones. Evil biotic boss Ackerman casually asking her brother, remember that private military firm we acquired last year? Counts maybe. I'm not terribly convinced that the outwardly campy version of this movie would be any better, but I am very certain that this one is bad. Diane Johnson plays Davis Okoye, a San Diego primatology expert with a checkered past and a mistrust of humans who has a special relationship with an albino gorilla named George. The opening act of the film, in which we meet Davis and his band of beta sidekicks who gush about the kale bread they made last night while the pacifies the beast, is so transparently dictated by Johnson that I was tempted to feel embraced for him. It's an incredibly unpleasant 10 or so minutes to get through, and I wonder if I had accidentally wandered into a narrative adaptation of a Mike Cornwich book all the way up to the point where a blushing blonde impressed with Davis' handling of the gorillas asked if they can discuss his submission technique over drink sometimes. It doesn't come off as a joke about Johnson cartoonish Superman persona so much as an earnest advertisement for how not to be, in his words, a Candias. Luckily, we don't spend too much time with the pitiable gag when an outfitting lab owned by the shady white and technologies explode in space. Canisters of a special neon green gender enhancing go fall back to Earth where they are promptly gobbled up by an alligator, a wolf, and our dear friend George. The animals get big and essentially indestructible. Some get new abilities. Have I mentioned the flying wolf? And they all want nothing more than to destroy. Davis ditches the skinny boys and team up with Kate Caldwell, a discreet genetic who makes a far better foil for him, not least because Harris is the best part of this things by a mile. They go on a hunt for a possible antidote while the two of beasts covered on Chicago inevitably leveling it in their rage. Roy Rampage. A quick digression: when I was in high school and we were learning about the principles of flight, we used Microsoft's Flight Simulator to model lift, drag, and some other ideas I have since forgotten. Flight Simulator, for whatever reason, is in charge around a model of Chicago, and one of our exercises to demonstrate and accuracy was to fly our planes into the Sears Tower. This is in 1999, 2 years before flying planes into building became more pacifically frowned upon. I only bring this up because the Sear Tower has always been a bizarre World Trade Center in my imagination, making the climax of Rampage as tough to watch as its toxic masculine opener. Or to put it another way, your possibly self-consciously stupid rock-starring pre-summer actioner is all fun and games until you invoke 911. The three mutant animals drawn by a radio frequency being emitted by voidant technologies from the Willis antenna, whatever just go with me, all scale the buildings, smashing it as they go up and inevitably bringing it down in a cloud of debris and smoke. Plenty of movies has tricked up our anxieties of death and destruction in American cities since 2001, but few have recreated them with such faithfulness and even fewer in service of a giant flying valve. I will admit I had eased myself into a kind of plausibility in order to get through the film, talk about mission technologies, but at this point it was too techy to enjoy in any good conscience. As ash falls from the sky and distant screams are heard, Davis and Kate emerge limping from the dust cloud. There's still about 15 minutes of movie left. I need a drink, quiet Johnson. I hear that body. Rampage Movie Review. A shady technology company developed a process that runs innocent animals into giant killer monsters. Unfortunately, their serum infects the wrong animal, including the gorilla pal of zoologist David Okoye, putting the entire world at risk. In Hollywood, if you have a really dumb idea for a movie and a lot of money to make it, you call The Rock. That's not intended as an insult. The guy is just the industry's greatest salesman. 260 pounds of oiled muscle and oil free charisma. He can sell you things you thought you actively did not want: a Jumanji reboot, sequels to G.I. Joy, and Journey to the Center of the Art films featuring Kevin Hart. Okay, everyone has their limits. Rampage is a quintessential Jensen project based on a video game with no story or character to speak of from a time before many of his fans was born. It sounds like a dreadful basis for a movie, and it's short of it, but it also short of a lot of fun. The original Rampage came out in 1986 when games were simply you moved from side to side, either punching things or shooting them or gorging on white dots and ghosts and repetitive. And we were glad of it. In Rampage, players control one of three giant monsters: a wolf, a lizard, or a gorilla, and try to destroy cities before the military could shoot them down and turn them back into the humans they apparently once were. Sacrilegiously missing with the canon, the Rampage movie does not feature humans becoming monsters. Instead, while trying to find a cure for cancer by gene editing, scientists have not so accidentally created a serum that turns normal animals into angry, enormous monsters. To avoid the prying eyes of the government and others who might notice Titanic hamster devouring downtown. These sadness has been carrying out their experiments in space, but things go awry The space station blows up, and several canisters of monster juice are sent hurtling to Earth. Two land in the wilderness, and another crashes into a San Diego Zoo, where Des Okoye works with gorillas. His favorite and albino called George is affected by the serum and grows colossal and violent. To pick apart the plot would be a waste of time because it's poorly functioned. There's no subtlety or art to it, nor should there be. This is a movie about gorillas punching buildings. You don't want character work getting in the way of that. It's fine when the villains, brother and sister, megalomaniac, Malin Ackerman, and Jake Lacy say they need to turn their office building's radio aerial into a giant monster homing beacon, so had their tech guys modify it last night. Because who cares how they did it, equally who's concerned that Naomi Harris, masculinity science-wide character, hacks a multi-billion-dollar tech companies using a thermostat she found in the fridge because it's all connected to the same grid. Logic is only going to slow things down, those buildings will not punch themselves. When it comes to the building punching portion of the show, there could have been more of it. This very silly movie could actually have afforded to be a lot sillier. Brad Pitt directed of that other loony wreck joint San Andreas does not keep his tongue always fully in his cheek, and he sometimes seems to be shooting misguidedly for goal. Jason is mostly playing his gags with an eyebrow waggle, but not all of the film has his bred confidence. Those villains could be camper, the action sequence could use some more visual gags to enjoy the absurdity of the conceit, and is it greedy to wish the massive gorilla? Wolf and Lizard were even bigger. Warner Bros. May already have Godzilla and King Kong up its very groomy sleeve, and was perhaps concerned about stepping on those extremely big toys. But when it comes to city toppling beast, there's always room for more. Rampage is big dumb fun, but not as big dumb and fun as it could have been. Ridiculous, of course, but not as ridiculous as it might have been. As much fun as it has with the idea of animals stopping cities to rubble, it seems shy of going completely over the top, and it's the horror of it. Rampage movie is one of the best in Hollywood. Now, this is the point at the start of the review where I talk about how there has been a great movie adaptation of a video game so far, and I talk about the problems about adapting and trot out examples like Assassin's Creed and Tomb Raider. However, this time around, I don't think I have to do that because while this is by no means a masterpiece, I think it is the first film to really crack that adaptation puzzle, or at least the one who has got the closest to it. With that in mind, today we are going to enter the realm of giant monsters crashing into building, and who doesn't love a giant monster crashing into building. So to set the science, we open on the Athena 1, a space station orbiting the Earth, and it is clear from the first frame that something is very wrong. When we get inside, we discover that the crew have been killed and the space station have been ripped apart. The only one left alive is Dr. Carrie Arston, who is not allowed to use the escape pod until she has scored the science sample that Claire and Britt Wyden have been working on for their company Energene. Well, Atkins escaped the station after being haunted by the thing that killed everyone else, only to have her escape pod fail on re-entry. Meanwhile, we have been introduced to Davis Okoye, who is a primatologist, the head of the Pyramid Center at San Diego Zoo, also a former anti-poacher hunter and also a former US Army Special Forces soldier. He works mostly with gorillas and has a special bond with George, and albino gorilla, who Davis records as an infant and has taught sign language to. Well, some of the samples from the exploded escapes Pod survives re-entry and one of them crashes lands in George and Sklar. When the investigates, he gets sprayed in a green fog. The two other consensus crash land at Wyoming and the Florida Everglades, and the next day Davis finds out that something is very wrong with his friend. Now, before we move on, because of the big third act of this film is a bit hard to talk about some of the thing that happens without hitting spoilers, so just a warning here that there may be some incoming. One of the first things you notice when watching Rampage is what a great rapport Davis has with George. Now, of course, part of this is due to Dwayne Johnson's sheer on-screen chemistry. I mean, the man can smolder on cue. However, you have to also give props to the writing, the motion capture work of Jason Lillis, and of course, the digital wizards of Veta that make George feel like a real character in the film. Not just some of the writing in the film is not well great. However, there are several really funny moments between Davis and George, and not all of them have been spoiled in the trailer. Now, I said from the start that this might be one of the best video games adaptation that we have seen so far. So I wanted to take a moment to look at that. The original game the film is based on Rampage is an old arcade game. I mean, it is almost as old as me, and the young people around me regularly remind me that I am ancient. You play as one of three monsters that also appear in the film, and your aim is to destroy the city, eat the people, and avoid the military trying to take you down. The first big change between the game and the film is that in the game it is mutated people, and while here in the film it is the much more believable animal that get mutated. I think one of the reasons why this really work as a video game adaptation of that there really is no significant story from the original game. So what the film has done is left the giant mutated monster destroying cities from the game and attached their own story to it, and it's kind of works. Also, Rampage is perfectly okay with being just brutal at times. Introducing character that you think will be a big deal into a mercilessly kill them off via a giant monster. Indeed, the way some of the characters are killed is actually quite confronting to the point that I would not take young people to go see the film. All of this is wonderfully rendered in CGI with some really interesting character design. Thought it is odd that George just gets big with the other big god but also mutate. The action is all well filmed, taking clear inspiration from films like Jurassic World and King Kong. I am going to fall on the side of homage here, but maybe it is a little too close to be a homage. It is also interesting to see that it has taken 17 years, but the institutional evasion to watching skyscrapers crash in slow motion has gone. That is still a little odd to see for me. While it is good film, not everything works, and there are some things that do feel like they just took the lazy option. For example, let's list of the key bad guys in the film. We have poachers, private military contractors, and evil white, mostly incompetent corporate elites looking to profit from destruction. Oh my. It is like they went through a list of who was universally disliked and just ran with the top three choices. Also, there are some wide moments throughout the film, like when they have a heart to heart chat in the wreckage of a crashed plane. So they would be standing around the disguising bodies of all the dead crew as well as all the noxious chemicals split on impact and what every nasty stuff that is in the smoke, chatting like it was all normal. Also, just a small thing about MOAB would actually be dropped from a C-130 Hercules cargo plane rather than a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber because the bomb weighs over 9,000 kilograms, and also what radar are also trying to hide from here. In the end, do we recommend it Rampage? Yes, Well, overall we do. It is good action film. It has a strong lead and you will get the sea giant monster demolishing a city. It is also one of, if not the best video game adaptation to date, but it kind of gets that way by stripping everything from the game bear the core concept, which is both interesting but also probably the direction we are heading with video game adaptation until someone can work out how to do a proper story. Rampage movie is either transcendently bomb, surprisingly brilliant, or both. Rampage is a real head scratcher. Either it's the best movie I have seen in a while, or it's secretly a work of genius. Oh, I guess why not both? Based on an arcade game from the 1980s that was later ported over to home video game system, Rampage stars Dan "The Rock" Johnson as a primatologist at the San Diego Wildlife Sanctuary who finds himself trying to save the world when his best buddy, an ape named George, gets infected by a fast-moving gender modification that turns him into an enormous rage-filled, deadly killing machine. It's both a braggingly predictable posturage of an action movie. Absolutely nothing happens here that you have not seen in a movie before, with the possible exception of some cross sign language humor from a giant gorilla with weirdly charming. To the extent Rampage succeed, it does so specifically because it knows it does not have a single original thought in its head. And it's not even going to try to convince you otherwise. It's a movie about smashing things and things getting smashed, and also it has The Rock. If that sounds like an appealing thing to watch at the end of a long day, then this is the movie for you. Go knock yourself out, you will have fun, and it's possible you might leave the theater with something to think about too. Rampage puts a twist on the arcade game but not on the action movie formula. In the Rampage game, players picked one of three monsters and tried to reduce various cities to rubble over and over again. While eluding military onslaught in the movie, our heroes are trying to keep that from happening. This twist insult in a movie with a synopsis that reads like something most people would cook if they were asked to scratch out a genetic action movie plot in 20 minutes. In the prologue, a researcher spacecraft transporting some kind of huge fire creature blows up, but not before a scientist on board escapes in a pod with the samples. Then a pod blows up and the samples survives and land on Earth. One is booming, where a whale finds it, one is in the Everglades, where an alligator locates it, and one is in the San Diego Wildlife Sanctuary, where good natured George stumbles across it. The research has to do with genetic modification, and it is, of course, both kind of illegal and being conducted by a big bad corporation headed by a sibling pair, dim but pretty Brit Wyden and his constable, more Cathroid sister Claire, who have a big office at the top of a building where they talk about making evil plans and peering at screens benefits a pair of villains. Meanwhile, Davis Okoye, played by Johnson, the primatologist who raised George from birth, finds that his friendly, funny gorilla friend has been subsumed by a wrecking monster. The movie centers on this quest to keep George safe, which leads to him teaming up with a scientist named Dr. Kate Caldwell, who used to work for the Widens, and eventually a sardonic government operative named Hardy Russell, who delivers quite with a drawl as a radio frequency emitted by the Widen draws that repeatedly growing destructive pressure to Chicago. The crew follows in hot pursuit, and the military starts closing in as well. And so, yes, this movie has it all: greedy corporate villain, smart scientist, strong and sensitive hero, big monsters, impending destruction, and a very modest message, not pushed too hard, suggesting that it's human who are the real animals. That's not exactly a strike against it. Action movies like this are meant to be explosive and loud and cathartic and maybe a little funny. Sure, Rampage has some plot holes, but it definitely does not care, and you really don't need to either. This is a movie based on an arcade game. The goal is to get to the big fight. It's also shot in a clear and coherent way. You pretty much always know where you are located, spectacularly during the long, climatic action sequence, which is more than can be said for, say, the Transformer movies or even a great many Marvel movies. It's oddly comforting to watch huge fight sequences that feel this straightforward rather than trying to make you dizzy. They just want to make you cheer. Diane Jensen headlined Rampage, but the script does not seem to realize it. Most importantly, Rampage has Diane Jensen, one of the few remaining movie stars who can open a movie just because he is in it. His last movie, Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, has made so much money that it recently became the highest grossing Sony release of all time. The best parts of Rampage are his scene with George, which are generally funny. The gorilla has an excellent sense of humor, but is this right to say? Oh, well, the pair's chemistry is also great, and the movie's only truly touching moments result from their relationship. But while Jensen in the movie's greatest strength, he is also crucially its weakest link. Salman appears to have made a miscalculation when writing Jensen's character. People are constantly accusing Davis of being a bit of a misanthrope, of preferring the company of animal over people, of not liking people. That's his defining characteristics as a person. He doesn't like people. Except Jensen absolutely cannot telegraph a dislike of people. He is affable and polite with a winning smile, and we never see him be anything other than kindly toward human or animal unless they deserve it. Certainly, the prefers the company of animal. I mean, he is a primatologist, and sure, his best friend is a gorilla, but it's impossible to see him as antisocial or unfriendly. If you have Jensen in your action movies, you rewrite the screenplay around him. Davis would have been much more convincing as shy than Crowdumblingly. But even that would have been a scratch given Jensen's megawatt charisma. But that's a minor quibble. Rampage wants to be a smash up an action movie and it does that just fine. And if you like, I want to overthink it, there's a possibility that it might actually be brilliant. Okay, but if Rampage is actually incredibly smart, the movie setup is that DNA from a variety of creatures is being spliced into one package that can be delivered to a single animal, which then takes on some of the other characteristics. So, a wolf, for instance, might not just become inbred once infected, but also develop the capabilities of both a porcupine and a flying squirrel. And importantly, it also becomes extremely large and just keeps growing larger and larger. In a wide way, this works as a metaphor for the film itself. Rampage was a fun arcade and video game with a simple concept, smash things, and not much more, but infected with cinematic DNA. It becomes this weird hybrid monster, taking on characteristics that feel lifted from any number of other action movies, ranging from King Kong to Pacific Rim. And besides being just a lot of movies, it's one that filled with destruction. The most unnerving part of watching Rampage is that you're not sure how you're supposed to feel about all this destruction. By the end, presumably millions of people have died and whole sections of cities and buildings have been flattened. The destruction is unthinkable. But it ends on a cheery upbeat note. Anyhow, you would not want to dwell on the chaos and destruction too long because it might just kill the mood, which is both completely predictable for a movie like Rampage and well, kind of disturbing. Seeing people die in digital projection is not exactly like seeing an 8-bit city get flattened. And yet, the movie's only social critique, if it has one, is the suggestion that the cruel genetic modification of animals will lead to chaos and death of humans, while Rampage is almost certainly not some kind of stealth critique of big, loud movies full of senseless violence. It almost works on that level anyway. The movie's plot as a metaphor for the movie's gender. And I say there's almost no way that's what Rampage is up to. It is by all appearances not a movie with high valuation aspiration, and that's why it's pretty fun. But it's hard not to wonder just a little if Rampage is secretly much smarter than it pretends to be. Rampage is in theaters on April 12th. There is nothing wrong with a silly movie provided that is actually known that is a silly movie. There are few cinematic experiences more taxing than seeing a film approach a totally ridiculous concept with absolute seriousness as is suck out all of the entertainment value. If it's operating with a few winks and elbow nugs, however, a silly film can create an atmosphere suggesting that the filmmaker are trying to have just as much fun as they want the audience to have. And that can be effective steps easy to enjoy a big, knowingly dumb blockbuster, and that's exactly how you can categorize Brad Pitt's Rampage. The film carries the baggage of every single video game adaptation before it's ranking somewhere between not great and garbage. But Rampage is the feature to break his course. Fairly it's crazy dumb, but it's known it, and that awareness plus the insane charisma of both Dwayne Johnson and Jeffrey Deon Morgan elevate Rampage to being a surprisingly enjoyable time at the movies. The original video game, which let users play as a giant gorilla wolf or alligator destroying cities, does not really have much of a narrative, but the combined work of writer Ryan Eagle, Carlton Cuse, Ryan J. Condal, and Adam Secaril creates something that loosely hangs together. Davin Jensen stars as Davis Okoye, a primatologist studying apes in San Diego, California. He has spent years forming a close bond with the albino silverback gorilla named George. Performance capture done by Jason Lilais, but finds their relationship starts to change when a mysterious canister falls from space late on night and sprays George in the face with a strange chemical. The next day, George is discovered to not only be a whole lot bigger, but filled with enough rage to kill an amorous predator in a nigh-boring enclosure. Davis wants to help his friend and gets much needed information about the origin of the chemical from scientist Dr. Kate Caldwell, played by Naomi Harris, but it begins to look like any efforts might be pointless. Not only is George growing bigger and ever more out of control, but he is actually only one of three different creatures across the country that have been going through the crazy transformation. Rampage is essentially an excuse to let Jason Statham save the city of Chicago from a group of monsters, Dan Jensen, but you can also legitimately appreciate its commitment to the crazy simplicity of the source material from which it sprang. The perfect example of this is the entire mission of the film's antagonists, played by Malin Ackerman and Jake Lacy. They are the sibling owner of the conglomerate that create the DNA altering substance Debit Rampage, and it actually was their full intent to spawn giant animals. Of course, exactly what they plan to do with the animals once they have reached full size is never really fully explained, but the film also delivers the sense that it does not really matter. Claire and Brett Whiten are basically Saturday morning cartoon villains committed to causing chaos because that's just what they do. The film, on the whole, has a wide amount of fun with its ensemble full of recognizable faces, some of whom don't last very long at all. But the biggest takeaway from Rampage is the increased arc to see Dwayne Johnson and Jeffrey Dean Morgan make many, many more movies together. The former continues providing to be one of the most effortlessly charismatic action stars in the game, able to slot into any role and do this thing, but it's the latter who actually gets some of the biggest laughs and best moments in the blockbuster, playing a federal agent, and he is the man with it. Rampage is essentially a skewage. They are the sibling honor of the cartilage that create the DNA altering substance rocked Rampage, and it actually was their full intent to spawn giant animal. Of course, exactly what they plan to do with the animal once they are reached full size is never really fully explained, but the film also delivers the sense that it does not really matter. Claire and Britt Fighter are basically Saturday morning cartoon villains committed to causing chaos because that's just what they do. The film, on the whole, has a weird amount of fun and it's ensemble full of recognizable faces, some of whom don't last very long at all. But the biggest takeaway from Rampage is the increased arc to see Dan Jensen and Geoffrey Dean Morgan make many, many more movies together. The former continues proving to be one of the most effortlessly charismatic action stars in the game, able to slot into any role and do his thing. But it's the latter who actually gets some of the biggest laughs and best moments in the blockbuster, playing a federal agent and self-described asshole who gets caught up in the monster base. It's a as Tom Morgan here, Brad Patton used the word swagger and intensely honor in becoming an over-the-top cowboy dressed up as a spook. It would be a ridiculous performance in any other context, but it's perfectly at home in Rampage and leaves you wanting more. Aesthetically, the film is the kind of blockbuster that makes you wonder just how many scenes were put together on the same green screen filled stage, but does not look ahead. All things considerable, a lot of the action is set during the daytime, allowing the audience to get a real look at the creatures, and what's more, the character design are actually really great. In particular, the performance capture work to bring George to life is about the level of what has done for recent the planet of the astrology. The CGI is more noticeable in some sequence than others, but ultimately is not enough of a distraction to take too much away from the movie. Rampage is the movie that does require some open minds and an acceptance of its silentness, but it really presents an open invitation for audience to lean in. It's easily the best of the Diane Jensen Brad Patton collaboration, including Journey to the Mysterious Island and San Andreas, and breaks what has been deemed a curse on video game adaptations. You may shake your head at its ridiculous, but you will be smiling at the same time. Aris Ezerberg is the assistant managing director at Sanma Blend after graduating Boston University and earning a bachelor degree in journalism. He took a part-time job as a staff writer for Sanma Blend, and after 6 months was offered the opportunity to move to Los Angeles and take on a newly created West Coast editor position. Over a decade later, he is continuing to advance his interest and experts. In addition to conducting filmmaker interviews and contributing to the news and feature content of the site, Eric also oversees the movie review section, writes the weekend box office repost, and is the site's resident Stephen King expert. He has two King related columns. Rampage Movie 2018 review. Rampage, the last episode of urban destruction from director Brad Pitt and megastar Dwayne Johnson may legitimately be the stupidest movie I have ever seen, and I watched Airbud last weekend for some reason. It's also 100% the movie it's look like with zero deviation. That's not to say it's without a certain level of fun. Thanks almost entirely to The Rock, who does that The Rock does best. Only this time there are giant monster too. It's somehow completely bonkers and totally forgettable in the same moment. When Johnson Krishna and charms and cracks wise and basically plays his smart Alex self, which is gracefully most of the movie, and Rampage offers a lung-heated wild rage. The frontman of the whole shebang knows precisely what movies he is in. As does Geoffrey Dean Morgan, who slimes and swarmily grins his way through the film as a shady government agent who likes to play cowboy. He seriously has a barrel-handed pistol he carries tethered to the front of his pants and that he regularly stalks. Where Rampage lets loose with the mayhem, things move at a nice clip. It's easy to gloss over the idiotic bits, and it's possible to bask in the absurd audacity of it all. But for a movie based on a plotless 1980s arcade game, it has an insanely convoluted plot that bogs the entire thing down. Its key mistake is slowing down so the audience has time to recognize how idiotic it truly is. The game is simple. A mutant ape, mutant wolf, and Godzilla as lizard eat Chicago. In the game, there are also people who turned into these creatures. Effect glossed over a screen in order to get to this point in the movie. The four-credited screenwriter cooked up a cockamamie narrative that involved illegal biological weapon, a barely mentioned backstory about banned genetic engineering tech, a thread about mercenaries that goes nowhere, industrial espionage, a momentary anti-poaching screed, and a whole ad of other nonsense. You can forgive the ridiculous nature of the story and the ludicrous setup. After all, this movie is about monster destroying a major metropolitan city, the obvious 9/11 call breaks in poor taste. But when this absurdity takes the space and tempo to a dead stop, which happens multiple times throughout Rampage tanks, there's simply nothing else to prop it up. Dan Jensen plays David Okoye, a primatologist who rescues an albino ape named George from poachers and raised him. They are buddies who do things like prank the newtons at the animal sanctuary where they work. I'm not kidding. Davis is also an ex-military special forces bidas. Then there are the Widens, a brother-sister duo of cartoonish industrialists who fund off the book's experiment in space, which of course come crashing down to Earth and kickstarts everything. We also have Dr. Kate Caldwell, a tragically sequestered Naomi Harris, a now disgraced gymnastic with her own legs to path those experiment and the widen. It goes on and on and on. Where Rampage completely shits the bed is when the scripts trail all the forward momentum with a 5 minute scene where people stand around in a lab and say science word is an attempt to sound smart. Also, at one point, Dr. Caldwell uses Wikipedia to prove her point like a real sentence, or when the villain stands around in a bedroom or recount in depth their villainous plan to each other. It's not quite, hey brother, we have been conducting illegal genetic experiments in space and we could go to jail, but it's not much better. Rampage is only 107 minutes long, but there's so much superfluous filler that you could hack 25 minutes off the runtime and vastly improve the movie. For a movie that wastes so much time, there's nothing going on. Everything gets the most slapdash. Convenient explanation the wolf is named Death because voiders on the internet, the monsters need to be in Chicago. Of course, the bad guys have a thing that calls them directly to Chicago. Lazy seems mean, but it's not even that these beasts are unnecessary or dumb. They are the villain's plan is truly moronic. It's that they damage the one thing that movie has going for it: fast-paced spectacle level action. The action is at least possible. Peyton and cinematographer Jaron Present, who work in the camera department on San Andreas, are most comfortable when erasing cityscapes. Again, the 9/11 parallels are, in this situation, not great and as egregious as anything Zack Snyder did in Man of Steel, with even less purpose. They have a film grabs on the geography of building collapses. They are less sure-footed, however, when it comes to action. Choreography involving giant CGI monster, the staging is not always on point, and like so many movies of this sync, the relative size of the creature often does not match from scene to scene, even shot to shot. Consistency prove an issue for intense in one scene. Lizzie the mutant alligator dwarf George, only for them to be roughly the size a few cuts later. It's really The Rock that carries everything worthwhile about Rampage. Without his charisma and Viking charm in every scene, it would be an utter disaster and not the intended kind of disaster. The script hits harder, the relationship between Davis and George, with little success, it's fine and does what it needs to be, but there's never much emotion investment, and that's the only place the film could cramp any it. But for his part, Johnson's shoulders throb. He can shrug, say things like, "Of course, the wall flies and it slides," while every other character basically serves to deliver exposition. He just teams up with a creative to fight a giant lizard and a spine covered wolf. If someone has to, I guess I am glad it's him. The movie Rampage The Rock Monster Mash is big dumb fun. Rampage does not bring action, comedy, and heart as well as The Rock's best tentpoles, but there's a good dunderhead fun to be had here. Dan Johnson Rampage managed to be both one of the more enjoyable and one of the dumber video game movies in recent memory. Jason himself is no stranger to the world of video game adaptations, having started in the infamous 2005 big screen version of Doom, a film that even The Rock has admitted fell victim to the infamous video game movie curse. I would not have been difficult for Rampage to fall into the same boat either, seeing as it's based on a property that started out as a Bally Midway arcade title in the 1980s and was itself a very straightforward riff on hockey B movies about monsters with bad temperaments. Johnson stars in Rampage as Davis Ukayo, a primatologist as a San Diego wildlife preserves who prefers the company of animal after his years of service in the military. And this time leading an anti-poaching unit, Davis now spends his day training new recruits and caring for the poached gorillas. In particular, George, a rare albino silverback gorilla, whom Davis rescued as an infant and taught sign language to. Everything changes on night when George is exposed to a strange chemical from a canister gas crashed down at the preserve, causing him to begin growing rapidly and breaking out. Desperate to help his friend before the government either takes him away or kills him, Davis finds an unexpected ally in a genetic engineer Kate Caldwell who claims to know what happened to George and how to cure his newfound condition. However, before they can do anything to help, George escapes and draws the attention of not only the authorities but the minds behind a secret operation known as Project Rampage. As it turns out, the situation is even more complicated, and Davis and Kate thought, and George was not the only animal that was infected by this unknown pathogen. For better or worse, Rampage the film neither aspires to be high cinematic pop art like fellow game adaptation Assassin's Creed, nor attempts to break the video game movie mold la Warcraft and its years Tomb Raider. Instead, this particular video game movie fits squarely into just an established brand and could have easily been an original sci-fi film about the rock battling giant monster. Had it dropped the reference to the original games, Rampage does not blind action, comedy, and heart as well as The Rock's best tentpole, but there's a good dunderheaded fun to be had here. Rampage marks the third collaboration for Jason and directed Brad Patton after their family-friendly 3D adventure sequel Journey to the Mysterious Island and natural disaster thriller San Andreas. Patton applies the experience he gained from making those films to positive effect here, resulting in one of his more polished efforts, starting with the movie's Gravity SQ opening aboard a space station orbiting the Earth and continuing on to the city-wrecking meme that dominates the third act. The movie does not exactly boast a rich color palette like San Andreas is mostly painted in flat shades of brown and gray, but its action and set pieces are photographed in a clean fashion that make them easily to follow. Rampage also combines elements of a monster horror movie with a disaster tentpole, military action adventure, and as mentioned earlier, even a cosmic thriller at one point. Further showcasing Pathan Rage as a tractor in the process, the actual story of Rampage is cheerfully dim-witted and attempts to use half-baked science fiction concepts, ergo genetic editing, to explain the cause behind the film's wrecking, mutating giant bombs armed with a green story, and script credited to Ryan J. Gondel, Carlton Cos, Ryan Eagle, and Adam Sequilai. The film is loaded with hammy exposition and hand-wavy explanation for what is even happening and why characters are doing things at any point in time. Fortunately, Rampage typically avoid taking itself too seriously, and Piton and his crew likewise favor forward momentum over in-depth plot or character development. Rampage may not much have more on its mind than the games about city-wrecking creature that inspired it, and the B movies that inspire them, and it usually avoid pretending otherwise. There's not a whole lot to its character either, though the relationship between Davis and George, prolific creature performer Jason Lillis, provides the film with a serviceable emotional core. Rampage struggle to maintain the illusion that The Rock is not interacting with a CGI character brought to life through motion capture and green screen, but it does succeed in making George a fun reflection of Davis' personality. Reed and crude but with a heart of gold. Meanwhile, Jason has enough charisma and swagger to sail Davis as being a worthy hero in his own right, with a simple character art to boot. Harris, as Kate Mosley, exists to react off Jensen antics and keep Rampage plot moving forward, but she is relevant to the story and makes for a proper sidekick to Jensen. The other supporting players in Rampage, however, are as ridiculous and cartoonish as the genetically edited monsters wreaking havoc. Jeffrey Dean Morgan's government agent Harvey Russell, for example, stunts around with a giant belt buckle and a pistol in his hustler for the entire film, lest anyone forget that he is the cowboy maverick type. Morgan wisely plays his role over the top, much like Malin Ackerman and Jake Lacy as Claire and Britt Wyden, the conniving sibling that run Eugene, the company responsible for Project Rampage. The rest of the ensemble is rounded out by familiar faces like Joe Mingbala, PJ Byrne, and Will Junley, but for the most part they serve as little more than glorified extras. In the end, Rampage is very much the tough in cheek and otherwise goofy video game movie that its trailer have promised. For both good and bad, it lacks the heart and memorable character found in the best movie for the Rocks band, see Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, but has enough popcorn entertainment value to earn a passing grade. Rampage would probably struggle to stand out in the upcoming summer movie season next to films that, by the look of them, are better crafted and offer more substance to go with their spectacle. That said, seeing as there are still a couple weeks until Avengers Infinity War arrive and summer with it, Rampage ought to do the trick for those in the mood for some enjoyable, forgettable blockbuster silliness. Rampage is playing in US theater nationwide. It is 107 minutes long and it is rated PG-13 for sequence of violence, action and destruction and brief language and crude gesture. Let us know what you thought of the film in the comment section. Rampage is basically inspired by a classic arcade game of the same name. Rampage is utterly ridiculous, crampy, yet fellow self-aware enough to be kinda shorter dumb fun. It's exactly the mindless formulaic romp it's been sold as, with star Jan Jensen trying to carry the whole thing on his charm. But even The Rock can only do so much in a movie that absurd. After an insanely awful genetic editing formula is accidentally unleashed, three wild animals are transformed into giant mutants who go on a yes rampage. It's then up to Ape Whisper's Davis Okoye to save his animal buddy, the city of Chicago, and the day. Rampage boasts a stone cold stupid script landed with some hilariously on the nose and cringeworthy dialogue, especially when it comes to all the pseudoscience involved in turning everyday animal into giant monster. This thankless task is mostly left to Naomie's Harris to deliver. The Oscar Naomie every presents closes up her stock character, Dr. Kate Caldwell, enough that I hope whatever houseboat Harris did this payback movie for is big as one of the giant monsters she's stuck explaining. If the internet joke is that the Fast and Furious movies were written by a 5 years old boy, the Rampage feels like it was written by the same kid at same 10. He has developed a few more nouns thought, but it's all still basically boom, smash, roam. Rampage is this generation, the vibe spring, yet it's still not even as thoughtful as the cheesy old giant monster cult classic. Dwayne Johnson anchored the film with his recursive mix of self-effacing humor, machismo, and heart. His character is a ludicrously over credential badass, a former special forces soldier turned anti-poaching operative turned primatologist. The ending of the movie explained. Rampage, Dwayne Johnson had the original ending changed. Rampage star Dwayne Johnson fought to change the original ending to the film. Johnson has come a long way in his acting career since his debut in The Mummy Returns. The actor was sold as the next big movie star, but after initial star vehicle like Dome failed to make much impact, he found himself starring in kids' films and comedies for a number of years. His fortune turned for the better when he signed on for Fast 5 playing the role of Rattlenest Federal Agent Hobbs. The character was an intense fan favorite and he has since become a major part of the series. The success of the movie also led to Johnson being offered more action movies and he is gone from strength to strength with hits like San Andreas and Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle. His tireless work ethic has also seen him crop up in multiple movies every year, which has also led to him becoming one of the highest paid actors in the world. His next film is Rampage, based on the famous arcade game. Rampage finds Johnson as a primatologist trying to stop giant mutated creatures smashing through Chicago, but one of the animals being George, a silverback gorilla. Jensen's character looked after period to his mutation. Jensen wants audience to feel good when walking out of his movies, and he reveals in a new Rolling Stone profile that when he read the original ending where George dies, he wants the studio to change it. I don't like a sad ending. Life brings that. I don't want it in my movies when the credit roll. I want to feel great. We had a big meeting where they gave me all the reason they thought George should die. He sacrificed himself, saving the world, killing these animals who had ill intention to harm mankind. He sacrificed himself like a brave soldier. Okay, but this is a movie. There's a crocodile the size of a football stadium. We are not making Saving Private Ryan. Jason did not reveal what Rampage new ending is, but he reached a suitable compromise with the studio that made both sides happy. The actor has become a brand unto himself in recent years, and he knows best what his fans like to see. It sounds like Rampage's scripted ending was designed to jerk a few tears from viewers, but since it's being sold as a dumb monster movie, a happier ending is probably the better choice. Rampage also marks the second video game based on movie Jensen has started in. Following Dom, movies based on video games are notoriously tricky to pull off, and the genre is littered with a awful dude. Rampage actually stands a better chance than most at recapturing the spirit of the game. However, since it was essentially a plotless exercise in monstrous smashing through cities, it's unlikely to earn stellar reviews, but the trailers at least make it look like a fun blockbuster. George Rampage twist ending was nearly much more darker. Director Brad Patton and action star Jan Jensen are back together for their third collaboration, Rampage, a loose adaptation of the 1986 arcade game of the same name. The film boasts big budget special effects and A-list cast, but it's Jensen's charm and charisma that make this movie worth watching. Even when there are giant-sized animals on screen, the amiable actor can command the audience attention. At this point in his career, Jensen is aware of his worth and the pull he has in Hollywood. He is not the type to throw around his waist, but he also doesn't get pushed around by studios. His fan base accepts plenty of action and humor from his projects, and so he feels a responsibility to deliver. Even more so, he wants the audience to leave the theater feeling good. Jensen used to pump quarters into the Rampage arcade game as a kid, so he was gung ho to star in the film adaptation. The only problem was that the script had one major plot point that did not sit right with him. George died in the original draft, considering the time spent developing the relationship between Jensen's character, Davis Okoye, and the albino ape, and what they overcome together. The star didn't want to end the film on a down note. The story goes that Okoye saved George from poachers in Ravana and raised him as to the San Diego Wildlife Sanctuary. So when the ape is transformed by an experimental pathogen into a raging behemoth, Okoye does not see him as a monster like everyone else does. Throughout the film, he fights to save his friend from the various government agencies trying to stop him. When he manages to calm his Semil Paul, they team up against the other monsters, Lizzie and Rolf. Lizzie is a good bit larger than George and has no trouble sending him careening into a building. The broken structure had a large rod protruding from it. The screws the poor primate through the chest. George is able to pull himself off the struct and then uses it to stab Lizzie through the eye. Once he is sure the giant crocodile is dead, he stumbles off and collapses. He does not seem to be breathing, and Okoye delivers he has passed. But then he speaks up and signs that he was only playing dead. That's a callback to the ape's dark sense of humor exhibited at the beginning of the film. So, just to be clear, in the original version of the script, George does not wake from his dirt nap. In a recent interview with Rolling Stone, Johnson explained, "I don't like a sad ending. Life bring that shit. I don't want it in my movies." He continued, "When the credit roll, I want to feel great." The ending became such a point of connection that Jensen threatened to walk away from Rampage to save George. Rampage is basically the movie almost quite rampage over original ending. While Dan Jensen's Rampage opened atop the box office last weekend, the Warner Bros. Film at one point almost lost its murky star. The video game adaptation marked a reunion between Jensen and his San Andreas director Brad Pitt, with Jensen filling the role of primatologist whose friend Gorge and albino gorilla is exposed to be a pathogen that mutates him, and two other beasts evolve and a crocodile into gigantic monsters. As the film progresses, mayhem is unleashed on the US, destruction issues, and it's up to Dan Jensen and his giant gorilla to save the day. But Jensen nearly quit the film when it was offered to him because of its conclusion. It's a Rolling Stone profile. Jensen revealed that in the original Rampage ending, George died and he was having none of it. So the script comes in and I am reading it, and at the end of it, George dies. I am like, no. Did I miss something? George cannot be dead. But I go back and yeah. Jensen then went on to explain why he didn't like the ending. "I don't like a sad ending. Life bring that shit. I don't want it in my movies. When the credit roll, I want to feel great. We had a big meeting where they gave me all the reasons they thought George should die. He sacrificed himself saving the world, killing these animals who had ill intention to harm mankind. He sacrificed himself like a brave soldier." Okay, but this is a movie. There's a crocodile the size of a football stadium. That's not making Savage Private Ryan. The actor elaborates on how happy endings are a key part of the film he makes and the relationship he has with his fans. "My problem is I have a relationship with an audience around the world. For years I have built a trust with them that they are gonna come to my movies and feel good. So every once in a while you have to drop this card, which is you are gonna have to find another actor. We need to figure something out. Otherwise I'm not gonna do the movie." This is incredibly fascinating insight into the Dan Jensen brand for lack of a better word, which was the topic of discussion on the most recent episode of the Collider.com podcast. In an era where movie stars have been replaced by franchise and non-IP, Jensen has nearly established a brand in which he himself in the IP. People come to Dan Jensen movies to see Dan Jensen. It doesn't always work out, and evidenced by Baywatch. But in addition to solid hit like Central Intelligence, you get something like Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, which becomes a worldwide phenomenon. Rampage rocks international box office with $114 million. Rampage just narrowly won the domestic box office, but the Dan Jensen film is proving to be a source overseas. Internationally, Rampage earned $114 million in 61 territories. With the domestic release of $34 million, the Warner Bros. And New Line video game adaptation has made $148 million globally. Rampage had the strongest opening in China, tracking in 55 million from 21,500 screens. In the UK and Korea, it made 5.7 billion each on 907 and 895 screens, respectively. Other peer markets including Mexico 4.8 million from 2,831 screens, Malaysia 3.5 million from 590 screens, Indonesia 3.1 billion from 687 screens, and Russia 3.1 billion from 2,668 screens. The next three territories to launch will be France, Germany, and Japan. Paramount, A Quiet Place came in second internationally as well with 22 million in 56 territories this weekend, along with its 32.9 million domestic weekend. John Krasinski's film has stacked up 155 million globally. Ready Player One also continues to be an impressive contented overseas. Steven Spielberg's latest generated 33.8 million in 65 markets this weekend, taking cumulative total to 360.2 million and the worldwide delight to $474.8 million. The film has done exceptionally well in China, producing 13.9 million on 8,000 screens this weekend. In China alone, the film has earned 193 million. In France, Ready Player One made 2.4 million on 667 screens, while in Korea it's brought in 1.9 million on 585 screens. It launches in another key market, Japan, on April 20, another popcorn pick depending on a strong international run to justify its expensive price tag. Pacific Rim, a pricing took in 6.1 billion in 66 territories. The sequel starring John Boyega premiered in its final market Japan this weekend with $3.3 million from 320 locations, bringing its worldwide total to $180 million. The sophomore weekend of Universal blockbusters grossed 3.9 million in 21 territories. The raunchy comedy from Key Canon accumulated 10.3 million in North America this weekend with a worldwide total of 52.9 millions. The movie starring John Cena, Leslie Mann, and Iki Brenzol bought in six markets this weekend. In Germany, it took in $1.2 million in 495 locations, along with 3, 0, and 8,071 locations in Austria. Meanwhile, Universal's latest collaboration with Blumhouse, Truth or Dare, earned 2.6 million in seven territories overseas. Combined with its 19.1 million in North America, the thriller featuring Tara Posey and Lucy Hale has collected 21.7 million worldwide off a budget under $5 million. I saw the biggest international open in the UK and Ireland where it made 1.3 million. Truth or Dare debuted in 18 markets next weekend, including Mexico. Rampage success proved that John Johnson can sell any movie. It was a hot race for the exit spot at the box office this weekend. Would A Quiet Place, the horror phenomenon of the year, carry that incredible word of mouth through to a second week at number one, or would Rampage came out roaring? Under typical circumstances, it seems inconceivable that in 2018, an adaptation of a video game featuring a giant gorilla as a central story point would have a real shot at box office success. Yet Rampage managed to be the most successful film of the weekend, grossing over $34.5 million domestically despite mixed reviews. Once again, we bore witness to the indomitable power of Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Rampage has already made over $148 million worldwide from a $120 million budget. For a film like this, which was released it set 2 weeks before the juggernaut of Avengers Infinity War, those are some incredible numbers. They are also par for the course with Jensen last year to the surprise of basically everyone. Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle became the fifth highest grossing film of 2017. With over 953 million in the bank, it outgrossed Spider Man, Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, and Wonder Woman